All right, Jake, some great news around this. I've found this story so fascinating for so long. Now, this is about the Aboriginal flag in Australia. The Aboriginal flag in Australia has a sordid history in terms of ownership, and from my understanding, the last thing that I heard was about the fact that the Aboriginal flag couldn't be used at a particular AFL game because it was owned, the rights were owned by a sporting group or something like that, and they couldn't actually reach an agreement to get the flag up and running for this particular sporting event. Now, since then, and I only caught wind of this on another podcast, just really slight, it was a really slight comment. They said, the government is trying to get ownership back. The government is trying to buy back ownership of the Aboriginal flag. So, I thought we better put this into the show because it's a fascinating topic and one which I think our listeners would be really interested in. I'm certainly interested in it. Tell us what's happening at the moment with this flag and who owns it and what's happening and, can I use it at my next sporting event?
Well, possibly, but
which will be in 2040.
2040, exactly. So the Aboriginal flag was, or the National Indigenous flag was created by the Lauritja artist. There we go.
Yep.
Harold Thomas. And so he retains and owns, and his trust owns that flag.
Okay.
So that is the number one point to make there. His rights to ownership of the flag remain with him and his trust.
Right.
Recently, before I go into the recently stuff, in the past, Mr. Thomas has granted access to flag makers, to souvenir businesses, but more recently to a clothing manufacturer, Wham Clothing.
Right.
And they have essentially, since getting access to this license, have wanted to essentially maximize on their intellectual property rights, and they've wanted to maximize the amount of money that they could make off this acquisition of these.
Of being able to say yay or nay to who can use the flag.
That's it. And so they've been sending a whole bunch of cease and desist letters to places like Sporting Codes, like very recently, as you mentioned, the AFL Indigenous round was considering do we have the Aboriginal flag or not during this major Indigenous round.
They decided not to
They decided not to, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was all around the fact that they couldn't reach an agreement. So it was probably twofold. Number one was that they couldn't reach an agreement with Wham Clothing, who holds the rights at the moment. But the second part of that is they didn't want to have to pay for the use of the Aboriginal flag. And this started a whole campaign around the Free the Flag movement. Trying to get government agencies essentially to acquire or to demand acquisition of the rights of the flag from Harold Thomas. So look, it's a really interesting thing. The fact is that it is a national icon. It is something that a large number of the Indigenous population identify with, so it is one of those things that and a lot of politicians, a lot of media activists, and indeed, a lot of media activists, a lot of media and activists have been saying essentially, this is the flag that we identify as a people. We need to bring this back within the Australian fold. This should not be something that is at the this should not be something that is a commercial activity. And on the other hand, you've got a bunch of the people that are in power, at least federally at the moment, the Liberal National Party, who do have this sort of the free market philosophy behind them, that they don't want to compulsorily acquire the flag, and instead, they've said that they're going to start working on the acquisition, the purchase of the flag. So that it can be used for personal and non-commercial purposes into the future.
Okay, all right. So it might be like a bit of a joint sort of licensing agreement sort of thing. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I don't think many people think of a flag being able to be owned by someone, right? Like you don't think of someone. It'd be interesting to contrast this with the rights of the Australian flag and when you're allowed to use that, and the rights of the Indigenous flag and when you're allowed to use that, and who you have to contact for it and all that sort of stuff. I don't think people see flags as something that you can particularly own, or that you're not allowed to use it for certain events or something like that. Like a flag, it almost goes against the idea of having a flag and having something that visual that represents, what we stand for as a nation. So,
and I suppose that is because in most cases, when you think of for example, a national flag, that national flag is held by the country, held by essentially the people. And the example is the clothing brand. What's the rugby brand?
CC, the Canterbury.
Yeah, Canterbury.
So the Canterbury Clothing Company.
Canterbury Clothing Company. So it's a New Zealand brand. Yeah,
right.
But when they, when they put the Australian flag on there, particularly for things like the Wallabies, etc., which our national rugby union team, they have to purchase the rights to to use that flag from the Australian government. And there's government departments set up to do exactly that. The difference here is that the clothing brand, Wham, and other people who want to access the rights of this of this flag are currently having to go to a member of the public, an individual, or who has set up a company around.
Yeah, like a private enterprise. Yeah,
a private enterprise. Thank you. Yeah. So interesting statement from Wham Clothing this week, who said that it was not.
Sorry, I was going to start singing a Wham song, but.
Last Christmas. No. Too early for Christmas. No. Quote,
don't get me started on that. Yeah.
They said, quote, "It was not stopping Aboriginal people or the community from using the flag for personal use, but when it was used on clothing for commercial reproduction, then we need to talk." So look, makes a lot of sense, but it is just one of those things. It is potentially not in the national interest to have this in private ownership. So it is one of those things that'd be good to bring into the fold, to make it Australian in all ways.
Oh, I like that, Jake. We can't end better than that. Make it Australian in all ways. That's perfect.